And the meeting's now live.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone, members, officers, and members of the public to this meeting of the Planning Control Committee. Before the meeting, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to explain the proceedings. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Chair. So we will be joined later by one planning officer, Naomi Reynolds, but she will be joining the meeting slightly late. So we'll check that later on. Procedure: if a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone unit will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will turn red, at which point it will be live and you can speak. When the public participants are invited to speak, their microphones will be made live by the committee officer. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room, and the results will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the chair will have a casting vote. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? No, back to you then, Chair.
Thank you. Apologies for absence, but apologies have been received from councillors Phil Weeder, Sean Nolan and Ian Moody. Having given due notice, Councillor Nigel Mason will be substituting for Councillor Nolan. Councillor Michael Muir will be substituting for Councillor Moody. And Councillor Steve Jarvis will be substituting for Councillor Weeder. Councillor Daniel Allen will be late. He will be here at 8:30. He has got work which he cannot postpone. When he arrives, you may get a hint as to why. Any further apologies?
Take a break for a second, just get the cameras frozen, because we can often start again.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Minutes of 17th of November 2022. I propose that we take as read and approve the minutes of the meeting on the 17th of November 2022 as a true recording of proceedings. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Councillor Tyson.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy to second. Thanks.
Thank you. Any comments? Can we take the vote, please, James?
Chair, that motion's carried.
Thank you. Notification of any other business, there's none. Chair's announcements. Recording. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recordings will be available to view on ModGov and the film recorded via the NHDC YouTube channel. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. To clarify matters for the registered speakers, members of the public have 5 minutes for each group of speakers, supporters and objectors. There's a separate 5-minute time limit allocated to member advocates. A warning will be given at 4 minutes to alert you have 1 minute left. At 5 minutes, you'll be advised that the time allowed has ended and the speaker must cease. Change of order to agenda. I've agreed to change the order of agenda items, and item 6, which is 19/101448, Thorn Wyvale Cuddicut Garden Centre, will be taken as the last item following item 10, which is the Church of St. Peter. Comfort break. I will take a short break at around 9 p.m, an appropriate time in the proceedings. Public participation. Can I confirm that registered speakers are in attendance? Councillor Ralph Munser. Yes. Nick Stafford. Thank you. Gavin Winter. Thank you. Mike Wilkinson. Peter Gartside. And Councillor Gerald Morris. Thank you. So we will start the proceedings with item 7, which is 22-02450/S73, Odyssey Health Club, Old Nebworth Lane, Nebworth Hearts. Tom Allington to present, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just one very quick update. We received, since the committee report was completed and published, we received a new plan, an amended plan. It didn't materially change any of the proposal. It literally was submitted in order to correct a mislabel on one of the floor plans. I think the second floor was labelled first floor incorrectly. That's been added to the application. So yes, this is a Section 73 amendment to an original scheme which was approved in November 2020 by committee for 86 dwellings at the Odyssey Health Club. So this seeks to vary conditions 2 and 17. If we can bring up the slides, please. Next slide, please. So this is the location of Odyssey Health Club, north of Nebworth. Sorry, next slide, please. The variation is with regard to a block of flats which accommodates plot 65 to 86. In essence, it was discovered that the undercroft parking at ground floor level was poorly designed and laid out. So the proposed amendment is to actually reduce that block of flats by a story from what would have been 4 stories to 3 stories, and the reprovision and reallocation of 22 parking spaces. So essentially the number of units is remaining the same, the number of parking spaces remaining the same. It's just those 2 variations. Next, so we have some photographs just to quickly run through. So as you can see, work on site has already commenced. If we can just run through the next few slides, please. Again, this is the state of the site at the moment. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is the car park which will remain in place, serving the remaining health club, and the block of flats sits next to that. This is the entrance to the site. Next slide, please. So this is the block of flats in question, part of the scheme. As you can see, this is what was previously approved, 4 stories. And if you can sort of make out the ground floor is basically an undercroft car park. And the next slide should show us what is now proposed. So now a reduced 3-story building, so no longer accommodation in the roof. So reduced in height. And the next slide, please. This is the layout as previously approved. Just make note of probably, so the building in question, so if you see the big car park at the, sorry, this isn't due north. North is to the left. So the car park to the bottom left, that's going to serve the remaining health club. The block of flats in question is the one on that rear boundary next to that large car park. So basically, if you go to the next slide, this will show you what is now proposed. So you've got increased parking to the front of that building. And you can just about make it out, where you have the row of trees separating the main street through the site and that large area of green space. There's now a row of parking spaces. That's mainly where the 22 parking spaces, which would have been at ground floor level of that block of flats, that's where they've now been reprovided. In short, it's the officer's recommendation that the changes are acceptable and therefore recommendation for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions or clarity on that at all? No. We don't have any registered speakers, do we? No. So should we go to the debate? Councillor Levitt.
Recommendation, Chairs. It's a fairly simple amendment and straightforward.
Councillor Tony Hunter.
Second, Chairman.
Thank you. So we've got a proposer and a seconder. Any other comments? Shall we go to the vote?
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 8 is 17/01955/1 Ickleford Mill, Alsey Road, Ickleford. Peter Bull to present, please.
Chair. So a few updates. Sorry, I'll try and be brief. Members will note that there is an addendum that's been circulated to the report, the officer report, following a recent High Court judgment relating to how pumping stations should be considered in the context of the Greenbelt. And the addendum substitutes the published paragraphs 4.3, 23, 26, 89 and 91 with revised paragraphs which clarify that the pumping station is an engineering operation that is not inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, providing openness and purposes are not compromised. So paragraph 150B of the MPPF refers. Second issue, report correction in relation to the section relating to public open space. Paragraph 4.3.34, midway down, it says in the event of planning permission, and this should read, in the event of planning permission is granted, a condition restricting specific areas of the site to be used for developable and open space purposes as set out on the submitted developable area plan would be both necessary and reasonable. Point 3, the council's environmental health officer has also provided an update following a review of the submitted land contamination reports, and it is recommended that condition 29 as set out in the report is revised to omit the need for the information already provided, which is essentially a phase 1 report. And finally, now there's some clarifications from the in relation to the contributions for the Herts County Council Growth and Infrastructure Unit. These are set out in the draft heads of terms on pages 27 and 28, with the exception of waste services, which is index linked at BCIS 4Q 2021. All Herts County Council Growth and Infrastructure Unit contributions are calculated in accordance with the guide to developer infrastructure contributions index linked to BCIS 1Q 2020. That relates to secondary nursery services, childcare and special education and youth services. Primary education, the wording should be amended and to include a reference to a new school in Ickleford or the provision of serving the development. Youth services, the wording amended towards sourcing a new or exclusive shared use young people's centre serving Hitchin and the surrounding area. And the county councils also suggested the inclusion of a table to enable the calculation of contributions in the event that the housing numbers may change or the tenure. So that's the update. Just moving on then to the slides. This is an outline application for 71 dwellings and associated access, car parking, garages, landscaping and open space, including the demolition and removal of all existing structures, buildings and hard standings, and all the matters are reserved except for the means of access. And this is obviously at Ickleford Mill. So if we can go to the slides, please. Thank you. Next slide. So here you can see obviously the site edged in red, and an aerial view of the site again edged in red. Next slide, please. Here is a enlarged version. You can see then there's part of the site, the blue hatched area is excluded, but it's still within the applicant's ownership. Next slide, please. This is an illustrative layout. A lot of work's been done by officers and the applicant's agent to try and illustrate how the site could come forward at reserve matters stage. Includes some buildings to mirror the existing mill use of the site. Next slide, please. This is the developable area plan. So the area hatch green is to be retained as open space. the purple pink areas to be the area developed for buildings, and then the access and the other area hatched in yellow is the pumping station and existing access. Next slide, please. This slide shows the existing access. Just see that's, yeah, to the site there. You can see just kind of the middle part there. It's the main access, and then to the north, you can't see the text, but just below the legend, the north legend badge there, that's the secondary or emergency access referred to in reports. Next slide, please. So you can see here, this is East Lodge and the building beyond it. Next slide, please. This is a more fuller picture of East Lodge. Again, this is a building outside the application site, but retained by the applicant. Next slide, please. Just moving along Ardsley Road. This is the point where the new access, that's the boundary fence there. You can see that's where the new secondary access would be provided. Next slide, please. And in the distance here, you can see some of the original Victorian mill buildings, and obviously juxtaposed to that is the more recent mill building. Next slide, please. No further pictures of some of the original buildings there on the site. Next slide, please. This is moving along Ardsley Road to the south, heading towards the access. You can just see as the river crossing, there was like a walled area to the right of the picture, which is where the bridge is. Next slide, please. This is the main access to the site. And it's the public space you can see in the background there beyond the fence. Next slide, please. And looking from the south northwards, again, that's the same area of open space with the access just to the left of that white car. Next slide, please. Thank you. That completes the presentation.
Thank you, Peter. Are there any questions for Peter about his presentation? No? Right. We've got registered speakers. We have Gavin Winter and Mike Wilkinson. Sure. Just right, okay. Thank you. I will tell you after 4 minutes when you've had 4 minutes, okay? Right, please continue.
We concur with the officer report and fully support the recommendation to grant outline planning permission for residential use on the site. Following a strategic review of the long-established Jas Bowman business in 2015, the difficult decision was taken to sell the flour production milling element of the business, which was completed in 2016, to concentrate on the ingredients division. Bowman Ingredients have since moved their business to their Biggleswade site. The site at Tickleford is therefore now redundant and incapable of alternative employment uses.
So could I stop you a minute? Could you just come away from your microphone a bit, and it might be clearer.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. The site at Tickleford is therefore now redundant and incapable of alternative employment uses or conversion due to the high costs of remediation and retaining or redeveloping the building for modern uses. The site therefore comprises predominantly previously developed land in a Category A village as designated in the local plan, which supports new development. We have now brought forward an outline application for new housing on this site within the village settlement limits, which will provide a policy compliant 40% affordable housing provision and have the benefits addressing contamination, delivering new housing and consequential construction jobs in excess of 10% biodiversity net gain, and delivering Section 106 payments of over £2 million towards supporting a range of education, highway, healthcare, local services and community projects. Whilst parts of the site are in the Greenbelt, predominantly land south of the river, those areas will remain undeveloped and be used as natural areas of open space. A small area will be used as a pumping station. However, this is deemed acceptable given it's an engineering operation and essential infrastructure required to serve the development. Those areas will also be carefully designed to ensure they preserve the openness of the Greenbelt. We've also resolved all technical issues and sought to address concerns raised during the consultation process. All matters related to ground, drainage, highway access, noise, air and residential amenity are all dealt with in the officer report, which shows that they can all be addressed by appropriately worded planning conditions and dealt with at reserve matter stage. In terms of drainage, The removal of buildings and areas of hard standing will reduce the impermeable areas on the site and surface water runoff rates. Foul water will no longer be directed into the foul system in the village, but be pumped south to the Hitchin wastewater treatment facility, which has capacity. The local flood authority and Anglian Water have no objections to this approach, which will be a betterment to the existing situation. In terms of highways, there will be improvements, including a proposed zebra crossing, a further dropped curb crossing, new bus stops, and other highway works, including provision of a footpath either side of the main access, sorry, all to the satisfaction of the county highway officer to maintain highway safety. In summary, the residential proposals are in conformity with the local plan policies, given its location and previously developed status. It will improve the local environment and day-to-day noise levels compared to the previous mill activities on the site. It will provide drainage, ecology, highway and landscape and visual benefits, and will deliver a locally distinctive housing scheme to complement the village character. On balance, the proposals to restore and remediate this site, which would otherwise remain vacant, should be welcomed and provide much needed housing in the district. We respectfully request, therefore, you support this application tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for clarification for the speaker? Councillor Levitt.
Thank you. Just a quickie one, really. Where the access is at the moment, present access, there's two quite hefty crossovers where it crosses over the river there. Is it intended to retain those or make them a little bit more attractive, or it's quite wide, big areas at the moment?
The intention, obviously, the main access into the site is built for obviously HGV and industrial traffic. So therefore, the junction will be reduced to a size more associated with the residential development. There was a plan shared earlier which showed the highway improvements that would be made, including a zebra crossing and a footpath either side of that junction to connect into that zebra crossing.
Thank you. Councillor Nigel Mason.
Thanks. Clearly, it's very close proximity to the River Alton, just before it joins the River Hiz as well, both chalk streams, which we're, I think, all hopefully very keen on preserving. I noticed concerns have been raised about runoff from the site, sort of rainwater runoff and across the road and whatever, and into the chalk streams is a concern. I don't know if the question is best aimed at you or the officers about what's being done to ensure that doesn't happen. I saw the question was raised, but didn't see the answer.
Peter.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so the chalk streams aren't legally protected currently. The impact on streams is usually from the surface water runoff, and in moments of high runoff where there is surface water discharges into the foul sewer system, water companies can, subject to agreement from the Environment Agency, discharge into the rivers. It's understood that the foul water sewage system within Ickleford has flooded in storm conditions, and that the surface water runoff from a large part of the site presently is directed to the foul water system. The removal of the buildings and the hard standings as part of the development means that the runoff will be removed, and thereby reducing the potential for flooding from the foul water system. And Anglian Water have confirmed that the existing wastewater treatment facility, as already mentioned, has capacity to deal with the flows from the site. So in relation to surface water, the lead local flood authority are seeking greenfield runoff rates, and officers feel that this, as recommended by the lead local flood authority, could be dealt with by condition. And there are opportunities to include sustainable urban drainage systems, and there are highway works which also could reduce opportunities for flooding. So there's an overall kind of package that's available here to actually improve the surface water runoff that could cause problems to the chalk stream. So I think there's benefits in summary. So there are benefits to this.
Do you want to follow up?
Sorry, just to remind me, are those conditions already built in? They are. That's what I thought.
Thank you. So we're actually on questions to the speaker, and we've got Councillor Simon Bloxham.
Thank you. Yeah, similarly on the concerns that have been raised on access and the location of zebra crossings and things like that. Has that been taken into consideration with the proposal?
We have kind of engaged with the council's or county highway officers at pre-app stage and also subsequently during the application process. And the crossing points that were obviously south of the main junction were considered to be kind of an optimum location for kind of the zebra crossing that would allow people to kind of cross the road and kind of join the footpath on the opposite side of the road to the current Ickleford Mill. There is also the opportunity to turn left outside of the main junction, and there will be a further kind of dropped curb crossing point as well. See, the county highway officer at least is satisfied that that provides a suitable solution and mitigates highway safety.
Thank you. Any more questions of the speaker? Shall we, Peter, would you like to respond to any points?
Just to say that obviously the conditions already set out deal with a lot of the technical matters that are raised by interested parties, including the parish council and neighbours, and officers have reviewed these and feel that they're robust enough to ensure that necessary protections in place to ensure that the reserve matters scheme should come forward and would be a positive contribution to the village.
Thank you. Shall we go on to debate? Who would like to start? Councillor Levitt?
I was waiting for somebody else, but I'll go first then. I know the site quite well because I used to supply equipment to the site, so I know it quite well. And there is massive areas of concrete there. The whole site, in fact, is concrete. So I can see how it will improve the runoff there because there's nothing at all permeable about what's there. There's big buildings, big roofs and everything. I think everything's where we are at the moment, bearing in mind this is an outline application. I think everything's very well conditioned. So I'm going to move the recommendation, Chair.
I've got some more speakers. Councillor Tony Hunter.
Chairman, Councillor Levitt more or less said what I was going to say, and this is the principle of development and the access and the conditions, everything's in place. So I think we'll have a longer debate on reserved matters, but as far as it's concerned, I'd like to second the proposal.
Thank you. Can I just take the other speakers? Councillor Alistair Willoughby.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested. So to the south, the green area that's proposed to stay as an open space. I note that Ickleford Parish Council asked about the possibility that that be gifted to the parish council in perpetuity to ensure that it doesn't become any other kind of space. Is that something that is possible that we could?
So sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you because you can't address the speaker on this.
Sorry, this was actually for officers. I was just.
Oh, I see you're looking.
Sorry, sorry. I was just looking up as it happened. Sorry, yes, Peter. Sorry, is who I was asking the question.
Thanks. Yeah. So we met with the parish council. We discussed this. It transpires that the land to the south is outside of the parish, which causes obviously some problems in terms of adoption. But officers feel that there's necessary safeguards with the designation as a green belt. That land shouldn't come forward in any other form other than a green open space.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Willoughby? Any other? Yes. So we have got a proposer and a seconder. Shall we go to the vote? Please, James.
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 9, 22/01229 stroke FP, land adjacent to Red Brick Cottage, the street Kelsall, Royston. Alex Howard to present.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Excuse me, I've got a sore throat at the minute. Some updates for you. There are a few. On the 6th of December, an amended ecological appraisal was submitted, taking the relocation of the proposed access into account. It's noted that this relocation has not changed the findings or opinions of that report. A number of emails and documents have been circulated to members over the past few days. A statement from the applicant's ecologist that deals with the consideration of the hedgerow that fronts the street in the context of this application, as well as a statement from the applicant's agent on the merits of this proposed development, as they cannot attend tonight due to illness. They were circulated on Monday the 12th. A further note from myself was sent around yesterday on Wednesday, which was concerned with the submission of amended plans that better reflect the extent of removal of the existing hedgerow that fronts the street. These plans will form part of my presentation and have been online since Tuesday. Whilst on this topic, I think it's important to clarify from the outset the extent of the removal of the existing hedgerow that fronts the street. My officer report states that the entire hedgerow is to be removed, set back and replaced, which, following clarification from the applicant, is not actually the case. The amended plans submitted on Tuesday show the extent of the removal in a visual sense, but for the avoidance of doubt, the hedgerow is to be partially removed as follows. The hedgerow is 55.3 metres in length on the street, and to form the access and visibility displays, 12.5 metres is to be removed, and 8.3 of this will be replanted at an inset angle. This will leave a 4.2 metre gap as the access width. Therefore, paragraphs 4.3.14, 15, 25, 30, 33, and part of my conclusion are hereby updated as they reflected the entire hedgerow being removed. Due to the aforementioned considerations regarding the hedgerow and the extent of its removal, condition 13 will have to be removed and or amended to reflect what is actually proposed on site, should you be minded to grant permission tonight. This is because condition 13 is drafted to deal with the replacement of the entire hedgerow across the frontage. I have noticed some errors in my officer report, which I should like to bring to your attention. Under other matters at 3.3.38, the final sentence reads, that said, the site is within flood zone 1, which means it would be fair to conclude that the proposed development would result in an increase in flooding. This should read, would not result in an increase in flooding. In my reason for referral section on page 1, it reads, the application has been called in by Councillor Morris on the basis that the applicant believes that. It should read on the basis that he believes that. And lastly, I am aware of an email sent to Natural England by Councillor Morris on Sunday, the 11th of December, seeking further clarity on the level of protection awarded to this hedgerow. And as far as I'm aware, there has not been a response. So if we could go to the slides, please. Thank you very much. So the application site is located on the east side of the street in Kelsall. It's currently a meadow and benefits from an existing access to it from the street. The site is split from the street by a mature hedgerow, and there is a public footpath that runs from north to south through the site. All of the site is within the rural area beyond the Greenbelt as per the North Herts local plan. Next slide, please. So this photo shows the street coming towards the site from the north. You will see the site and existing access on the left and existing residential properties on the right. Next slide, please. This is just another photo that shows the existing access onto the site. Next slide, please. And this photo is just a close-up of the site over the existing access gate. Next slide, please. So this is a photo of the street slightly further down from the first picture. You will see the existing mature hedge on the left and the driveways to existing residential properties on the right. Next slide, please. This is a photo showing the street looking back up in a northern direction. The hedgerow is now on the right. Next slide, please. This photo shows the southernmost corner of the site with gates that are the access to the footpath. Next slide, please. This is a photo of the site from the eastern corner, looking back towards the properties on the street. Next slide, please. This is another photo of that relationship. Next slide, please. And this is another photo of that relationship with the properties on the street from the site itself. Next slide, please. This is an aerial view of the site from Google Maps. I've just added this to sort of contextualize the relationship of the site and the immediate properties. Next slide, please. So this is the existing and proposed location plan for the site, with the site edged in red and the remaining curtilage in blue. The proposed location plan has been amended as part of the submitted documents on Tuesday to show a slightly wider hedgerow. Next slide, please. So this is the site plan and streets and elevation of the dwelling proposed. The annotations identify existing and proposed landscaping, the filling in of the existing access and the proposed new access. This has also been amended, as you will see on the proposed site plan. That yellow shaded area is the extent of the removal of the existing mature hedgerow. Next slide, please. This is a detailed access layout plan that shows the reduced visibility displays following a speed survey that was conducted at the site. Next slide, please. These are the proposed floor plans and elevations for the dwelling and double garage. The annotations identify the chosen materials. Next slide, please. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Any questions, clarification on Alex's presentation?
Thank you. Alex, there's just one question I had about the hedge there. I got the impression from what I saw before that the angled section of the hedge by the driveway was the original hedge, which was just cut back, not removed and replaced with something new. Is that correct?
Yes. So my understanding is that roughly 12.5 meters of that hedge is to be removed, and then about 8.5 meters of that is going to be replaced by an inset to get the visibility displays, leaving that roughly 4.2 or 4.3 meters for the hole in the hedge, as it were, for the cars to get through.
Fine. So that would be new planting then, that stretch. And the other question I had was, on the site plan, you can see that there's a whole section of new hedging to be planted. Do we know what the length of that is? Because it's cut off at the top.
That is, I did circulate a response from the applicant's agent, and that does actually mention how much new hedging there is. I think it's over 100 meters of new hedging, I believe. I could find that out and confirm that in a moment, if you would let me just have a look.
Do you want to do that now, Alex? Okay. Just wait a moment.
So speaking from the document that was circulated by the agent, it says new hedgerow is to be planted along the footpath and existing gateway boundaries of 121 meters in length. Therefore, when the site is completed for the landscaping as denoted on the plans, there will be 116.8 meters more hedgerow than there is now.
Councillor Michael Muir.
Thank you. At the top of the plan, there's a pond. Is that pond in the ownership of the applicant?
The pond is, I believe it's within their ownership. It's outside of the red line, so it doesn't form part of the application as far as I'm aware, but it is part of the blue line, which is the sort of remaining curtilage of their land.
Ask if they own that pond, does it need to be cleaned out and brought up to a reasonable standard? If they own it, I would like to see a condition that is done.
I mean,
to go to rack and ruin.
As much as I agree with you that because the site is outside of the red line, we can't enforce conditions on areas of land that are not within the red line. But I believe it is the applicant's goal to obviously try and retain that pond and the biodiversity that is within it.
Is that okay? Is that okay? Thank you. Can we go to the registered speakers, please? Peter Gartside.
You can start.
My name is Peter Gartside. I'm a long-standing resident of Kelshall. I represent the parish meeting, which has objected to the application. The objections of parishioners are well documented on the portal, there being no supporters. The application arises under the B status accorded to the village in the local plan. Parishioners consider there is much to like in the local plan. There is no fundamental objection to B status infill, and they like the affordability and environmental provisions within the local plan. The application in hand is for an awkward site squeezed between the footpath and the road. It is towards the end of a dead-end, twisty lane. It is an historic site dating back to Doomsday, of natural beauty and popular with walkers. Parishioners consider this to be one of the least suitable of infill sites in the village. It is clear to them that if this site is approved, then the planning authority cannot reasonably refuse a very substantial level of infill development in the village, given its geography. At present, the total number of houses in the village core stands at 44, with infill gaps between the houses characterised by meadows, grazing horses and orchards. Taking the plot size of this proposed development, accommodating a 4-bedroomed house, there is room for 38 such infill houses, all with road frontage. If you take the road frontage of the council's own plot, for which planning approval was given under 20/02292/OP, there would be room for twice as many again, i.e. 76 compared with the 44 now. This would more than double the population of the village core. It would cause severe infrastructure problems, particularly road widening and turning areas, and would alter significantly, we believe, the character of the village. This would not, in our opinion, accord with the term limited infill described in the plan. Approval of this development would suggest that the planning authority's strategy in realising its infill policy is based on a first-come, first-served basis, the consequence of which will be a feeding frenzy of applications. Residents and their developers would be driving the execution of the policy, not the planning authority. This pits neighbour against neighbour, as in this case, and absorbs an enormous amount of the planning department time. It would also suggest to parishioners that their concerns over affordability and environmental considerations have been ignored. Of the category B villages, Kelshall is one of the smallest, and with possibly the largest gaps for infill. Strategic Policy 4, item 418, invites affected B communities to address such a situation through a neighbourhood plan. Whilst this would prove somewhat of an overkill in the case of Kelshall, we would ask that, given the particular features of the village, the planning authority engage with the parish meeting on how best to realise its infill objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gartside. Any points of clarification for Mr. Gartside? No? Thank you. Can I then go to Member Advocate Councillor Gerald Morris?
Thank you, Chair.
The adopted local plan only allows for infill development within Kelshall Village. I've already supported an earlier successful application for a site in Kelshall, which was correctly identified as an infill. However, when you visited this site, I'm sure you'll have seen that this applicant has recently fenced in this site, which is actually part of a large 6-acre field, which could never be described as an infill. This may have misled everybody. North Herts Planning Officer Nigel Smith, who wrote our adopted local plan, could not possibly have envisaged a 6-acre field being an infill for just £1 million house. I would suggest that he should be consulted again. Furthermore, the latest proposal includes the partial removal of a 65-metre long hedge. Using the 30-metre age calculation, this hedge is at least 500 years old. Hedges that are longer than 20 metres and older than 30 years should not be removed. To do so can be a criminal offence with unlimited fine. I would suggest that we should be mindful of this. Hertfordshire Ecology did not respond to this consultation and should of course be made to do so. Have Highways approved the latest revision today to reference the access and the reduced splay? Replacing an ancient hedge with all its biodiversity and planting a few whips in another place will take generations to achieve what is already there. Natural England have not been consulted concerning the legality of this hedge removal. However, I have, and I'm still awaiting a response from them. The site also abuts a public right of way, and Herts County Council rights of way have not been consulted. Kelshall Village is part of the Thurfield Mains sewage network. The treatment plant is the second largest raw sewage polluter in North Hertfordshire. Whilst one posh £1 million house will not make a vast difference, cumulatively it will add to this pollution running into the River Rib chalk stream. The Environment Agency have not been consulted in respect of this sewage pollution issue. I do appreciate that our environment is not always a priority, particularly with North Herts planning decisions. I know that we have an adopted local plan, which includes largely building on Greenbelt. Because of the unique nature of Kelshall, CPRE should have been consulted. Looking at magic.gov, the field is part of a government-registered nature improvement area. It is a surface drinking water service safeguard zone, a water source protection zone, a higher level stewardship target area. Herts County Council guidelines for the area state protect and preserve the pattern of narrow winding lanes and associated hedge banks, sunken lanes, verges, and hedges. This application clearly does not follow County Council guidelines. The officer points out that if granted, this application will inevitably lead to further similar applications in Kelshall, and so the unique nature of this ancient village will be harmed. Please refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Any points of clarification from members? Councillor Morris? Councillor Levitt?
Evening, Gerald. What could you just clarify? What's the land currently used for? You said it's a paddock. Is it actually for grazing?
It's actually, thank you. It's actually a meadow which is grazed by livestock. It's obviously been fenced in to give the appearance of separating it from the 6-acre meadow that it is, but it's actually an agricultural meadow for grazing.
Thank you. Any other questions? Alex, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Just on a few points, there's mention of road widening and whether Highways are happy with the access. I can confirm that Highways are happy with the access with the reduced visibility displays following the speed survey that was conducted. They have no objections, subject to some conditions. And I note the point about obviously Historic England not being consulted and CPRE and things like that, but I believe that because of the nature and scale of this development, those statutory consultees probably wouldn't have responded, because most of these sort of respond to majors. So that's pretty much all I've got to say on that point. And the last thing I'll probably say is we can't really use the speculative nature of potential future development, you know, as a reason for refusal. We have to consider the case before us on its merits. And I think that's all I've got at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Shall we open up to debate? Members? Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you. I mean, clearly the issue here is whether or not this is really an infill site. And I must say that I thought the photographs indicated quite clearly that it was not what we would normally consider to be an infill site. And the location plan shows that it's a site which is opposite 4 plots on the other side of the road. So that, I think, emphasises the gap that is being infilled. And there's certainly been occasions in the past where the council has taken the view that gaps of that size didn't represent infilling. Now we're told that there's an application in Ashwell that sets a precedent, if you like, where there was an appeal. But having read the appeal, the inspector actually says that the site didn't meet many of the criteria in the local plan, and makes a considerable number of references to the fact that Ashwell is nearby and able to provide many facilities. Well, Ashwell and Kelshaw couldn't be more different in terms of North Herts villages. Ashwell has shops and pubs and buses, and Kelshaw has none of those things. So I'm not really clear that the Ashwell application is at all relevant. And the other one that's referred to is the one at North End, which Gerald Morris also mentioned. And the report that came to the planning committee on that, apart from discussing the question of tilted balance, because of course there wasn't a local plan then, points out that the land was effectively an extension of a domestic garden, and therefore rather different. So, I mean, it seems to me that the case hasn't been made that this is an infill location. It's quite clearly a piece of rural land that has been pointed out is part of a large meadow. It's fronted by a hedge of some considerable merit. And I think the photographs illustrated very well just how different that was from a domestic front hedge. Now, it's good that there's now a proposal to remove slightly less of it. That's probably reasonable, since most of the day you can walk up and down the middle of the street with no danger at all. There's the odd DPD delivery van, probably other delivery vans are possible as well, of course. But apart from those, there's not a lot of traffic. So it's welcome that those visibility displays have been reduced, but it still represents a considerable loss of hedge. And replacing it with 116 metres of new hedge somewhere else doesn't really seem to me to be relevant. It's been many years before it provides the same sort of benefit. So it seems to me that this is not infill, and we should not be granting permission on the basis that it will be certainly detrimental to the character of the village.
Thank you. Are you making a proposal?
Yes, I will.
Would you like to make your proposal?
I'd like to propose that permission is refused on the grounds that the proposal will be detrimental to the character of the street and to Kelshaw.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Muir, second.
Yes, I would like to second that. I certainly think it isn't infill, so I'm quite happy to second that proposal.
Any more comments before we go to the vote? Councillor Tyson.
Thank you. Yes, I'd just like to add to that. I mean, it is a question here about whether this is compliant with the policy, I think CGB1 about infill sites in a category B village. But we've also had recently a case come up where one of the deciding factors on whether land was suitable to be built upon was whether it was a paddock or a garden. And the argumentation there was that if it had been a paddock, then there wouldn't have been likelihood that permission should be granted on that land. And it was only because it was a residential garden that permission could be considered for that. So I think we've also got to decide here whether there's an and I haven't got an answer to this entirely. Perhaps Alex can help, but whether or not the status of this land is as a paddock means that it shouldn't be built upon as an infill site.
Alex, you wish to respond to that or any other comments?
I mean, I know the case you're referring to because it was one of mine as well. I think it was in Rushton, I believe. Yeah, I see the point you're making. I guess my response to that would be sort of each case on its merits is probably the best way to describe it. And I guess most infill plots aren't going to be residential curtilage or extended residential curtilage, like the one up in North End, for example, which was, as Councillor Steve Jarvis quite rightly says, was a side garden, as was the one in Rushton. But yeah, it's, you know, each case on its merits, you have to sort of assess what's there, and, you know, whether you think it is infill or not is obviously a matter of interpretation.
Tom Allison?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I just add to what Alex has mentioned. There isn't a sort of strict definition of what is infill, and as Alex has pointed out, it is very much on its own merits. In my view, it doesn't necessarily depend on the land use per se of the existing plot. In my view, I think when we're sort of assessing if something's infill or not, it's its relationship with the existing development, or how enclosed or not enclosed it might be. So, for example, you know, is it enclosed on 2 sides, 3 sides, etc.? So in this case, we've got development obviously to the front, and there is development to each side, albeit set slightly away. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor David Levitt.
Thank you. I was going to raise a similar point to Tom, actually, about what is the current use of this. So that's why I asked the question from Gerald at the beginning, because it's described in the application for paddock. Gerald's saying it's a meadow, but either way, it's currently agricultural use of one form or another. It's quite a big chunk of land as well. It's not, I don't think, looking at it, it is actually bounded on 3 sides or even 2 sides. It's got the buildings opposite, but between the houses as I'm looking along the road to the left, there's the 2 houses there, but then there's a big bit of woodland and scrub there. Then you've got the field, then you've got a path, and you've got what after that looks like agricultural buildings to the right rather than houses. So it's a big old plot with one house on it. So I'm struggling to see how it does meet the conditions of being infill, because behind it's very open. I'm struggling with this one, to be honest.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to add anything about this infill status? So we have a proposed refusal by Councillor Jarvis, seconded by Councillor Muir.
Councillor Jarvis has given a reading of detrimental to the street scene and the village heritage.
And infill. And not infill.
Not infill. You can repeat that. Sorry, I was just going to, well, I'll just let Councillor Jarvis give his reasons again as to why he wants it to be refused.
I said that it would be detrimental to the character of the village and to the street scene.
let's go to the vote. So this is for refusal. Okay. Right. So
Yeah, I thought I did.
you may not be
Question
the only person on this one. So
You want to run
so
that?
refusal,
run-
yes means refusal.
You want to run it again?
Yes, please.
Can we reset the vote? So yeah, just to clarify for members, yes is to approve the refusal, so to refuse the application. Thank you. Yep. Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried
Thank
to
you.
refuse.
Could I just ask Councillor Munster, could you possibly see if Councillor Daniel Allen is ready to come in? I know he didn't want to join us halfway through the last item. Oh, right, okay. If I send someone to rescue Councillor Munster, I may have to send someone to them to rescue them. And so on.
Sorry, just 2 seconds.
Let's continue with item 10, which is TPO 00203, Church of St. Peter, Purton Road, Holwell. Tom Allington to present, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application to serve a TPO on a substantial redwood tree. In short, a temporary TPO was served back in September, at which point the council has to carry out a 28-day consultation period. During that consultation period, we did receive objections to that TPO, in which case it then has to be made permanent, has to come before committee. In short, this is a substantial tree. Sorry, can we move to the slides? This is the Church of St. Peter in Holwell. You can see the tree there located to the south of the church. If we can move to the next slide, please. Here we have a photograph of the tree. As you can see, it's a very substantial tree, and in the view of officers, provides a very significant and positive contribution to the amenity of the area. And so it's recommended that it be permanently TPO'd. Just a quick note, it doesn't mean that no works can take place to the tree. They would just need to be subject of a TPO application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Muir?
Well, it's not a question. I like to enter the debate and propose that we accept the recommendation. I've used that tree on many occasions for wedding photographs there, so I know it very well. It will be absolutely shame if we say no to the tree preservation order. So I'd like to propose that we pass it.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan Derbyshire?
Happy to second Councillor Muir's recommendation.
Thank you. Comment? I'm going to make a comment because I live in the next village. So I do know the tree. And it is a tree of public amenity. It is very prominent. It's been there a long time. It hasn't moved. And it's in the custodianship of the church for hundreds of years. And I think that it deserves to have TPM. Thank you. Shall we go to the vote?
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Thank you. Do we want to have a break or do you want to continue? You want a break? Yes. Break for 10 minutes? 10 minutes? Yes. Let's break then. Yes. Welcome back. We're now going to take item 6, 19/0148, 448 FP, former Wyville Codicut Garden Centre, High Street Codicut. Naomi Reynard to present remotely, please. Naomi, are you there?
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Good evening. Thank you. I've got a few updates to start with. There was an error, and these going through the report first of all. There's an error in paragraphs 3.3 and 4.1.129. This was correctly reported that the following is correct that the following comments from Hearts Ecology. The applicant's ecological consultant has made some changes to the proposals and maintains that over 10% habitat unit gain, so biodiversity net gain, can be achieved under the proposals on site within the red line of the application site, including the attenuation basin area. The only outstanding issue related to the score attributed to the SUDS feature, which has been queried by Hearts Ecology, and therefore whether 10% biodiversity net gain can be achieved under the current proposals. The applicant had been asked to provide for further information on this. However, in the report, I'd said that they submitted further ecology information. They hadn't at that stage, and that was an error when the point when the committee report was published. However, they've submitted that now. We consulted Hearts Ecology and Hearts and Middlesex Wildlife Trust. And I received confirmation from Hearts Ecology this morning that with the updated information, they can confirm that they now consider the applicant can achieve 10% biodiversity net gain within the red line of the site. So therefore, there was a proposed clause in the Section 106 agreement, which is referred to in the planning obligations paragraph. This can now be removed. And that required that in the event that the council determines as part of the biodiversity and landscape management plan that a 10% biodiversity net gain cannot be provided within the land, then part of the biodiversity net gain will be provided on off-site biodiversity land. That's no longer required. There will still be a landscape ecological management plan condition that will still remain. Another update is I'd also missed that Hearts Ecology had recently recommended a couple of conditions. So I've incorporated these into the construction management plan and lighting scheme conditions, and the applicant has agreed to the first one being a pre-commencement condition. So I won't read the whole conditions out, but an additional bullet point will be added to the construction management plan condition, which is number 7, as follows. And the additional bullet point will read as follows. Ecological method statements to incorporate M1 general construction safeguards, M2 hedgerow and tree protection, M7 badger construction safeguard, M9 precautionary habitat clearance measures, and M10 timing of works from the ecological appraisal, April 2019 by Aspect Ecology. We'll also add in to the reason and in the interests of biodiversity. An additional sentence will be added to the lighting scheme condition number 18. So the additional sentence will read, the external lighting scheme should incorporate the considerations outlined with within M6 sensitive lighting within the ecological appraisal April 2019 by Aspect Ecology, an ecological lighting statement giving detail of definitive measures as to how this has been achieved. Got a couple of other updates in the report in the section of 106 obligations table, which is under paragraph 4.1.173. It's stated that the youth contribution is towards a new larger young people's centre in Welwyn Garden City or its future reprovision. It should be towards increasing the capacity of Hitchin Young People's Centre or its future reprovision. Also, the monitoring fees are incorrect. They should be £680. There's an error also in condition 21. Bullet point E should refer to drawing number 6729.MOS-PP4.0 revision C. As an update on representation, since the report was written, I've received one additional representation from a local resident, which can be viewed on the council's website. And they reiterated objections already included in the summary of representations in the report, and in particular they referred to overstretched infrastructure. And could I move to the slides, please, to the plans first of all? Thank you. And move to the next slide, thank you. And this is the GIS plan of the site. We move to the first plan, thank you. So this is the proposed site layout. As you can see, the western boundary abuts the B656, which is Codicott High Street. There's open land to the north, which is within the ownership of the applicant, with an existing recently planted orchard. To the east of the site is John Clement Sports and Community Centre, with tennis courts, scout huts, playing fields and a children's playground. And the southern boundary runs along the rear boundaries of properties in Tower Road and the side boundary of a property in the High Street. And as you can see, the attenuation basin area is to the north outside this housing allocation site, but within the red line of the site. The proposed dwellings largely face outwards on the west, north and east sides of the site, and there's a central street running north to south, and there would be a central green, as you can see, sort of the southeast corner. We could move to the next slide, please. I thought it'd be helpful just to visualise the proposals to show you the street elevations. So this street elevation shows the street that would front the B656 High Street, although it'd be slightly set back. The next slide, please. This shows a street elevation which shows the street along the southern boundary, which would back onto the Tower Road properties. Could I have the next slide, please? This slide shows the street elevation on the northern side of the proposed southern main road. The apartment block you can see there is at the centre, and there's a central green which you can see on the right, which is overlooked by dwellings. The next slide, please. This street elevation shows the eastern side of the central street that runs north to south. And you can see there's a central green at the southern end. Next slide, please. This is the street elevation which shows the western side of the central street running north to south, and with the apartment block at the southern end. And this street would be tree lined. And the next slide, please. This street elevation shows the street along the northern boundary, which faces outwards on the land owned by the applicant to the north. Could I have the next slide, please? This shows the three houses in the south proposed in the southeast corner of the site. And the next slide, please. And this elevation shows the dwellings that would face the eastern boundaries. They would overlook the existing playing fields and the playground. And the next slide, please. This shows the landscape strategy, so the landscaping proposals for the whole site. It includes a local area for play on the central green that you can see there. And the next slide, please. And this shows it's a northern open space planting plan, and it shows the landscaping proposals for both the northern boundary and the attenuation basin area. And now moving on to the photos, please. Thank you. So this is a view of the site from the B656 High Street, looking northeast. And the next slide, please. And this is a view of the site, again from the B656, but looking south. Next slide, please. This is a view looking towards the site from the public footpath to the northwest, which is public right-of-way 39. And you can see the water tower in the skyline, which is immediately to the southeast of the site. And next slide, please. This is a view from the farm. It's like a farm tract to the north of the site. And again, you can see the water tower, and you probably just make out the properties in Tower Road as well. Next slide, please. This is a view from the public footpath, right of way number 9, and it runs across the field to the east of the site. Again, you can see the water tower and the sites to the right of that. And the next slide, please. And this is a view looking towards the site from the east across the playing fields. And the next photo, please. And this is the existing playground, which is to the east of the site. The plans show the existing fencing that you can see there to be removed, and a pedestrian access proposed from the site to the playground. And the next photo, please. This is a view on the site and looking towards the southern boundary, and you can see the nearest properties in the High Street and Tower Road. The next photo, please. This is a view looking across the site towards the southeast corner. You can see properties in Tower Road to the right, the water tower in the centre, and you can probably just make out the floodlights of the tennis court. The row of Leylandii on the left will be removed, but those around the water tower will remain. And the next slide, please. And this is a view across the site looking towards the northeast corner of the site. And the next slide, please. This is, I'm standing on the site, looking from within the site, looking out towards the current northern boundary. These trees and shrubs will need to be removed due to poor health, but there will be replacement planting along this boundary, which will be secured by condition. And the next photo, please. This is a view looking into the proposed housing site from the land to the north within the applicant's ownership. As I say, the poplar trees and the trees along this and shrubs along the boundary will need to be removed, but there'll be replacement planting secured by condition. The next slide, please. This is an area, so this is within the red line of the site for the attenuation pond. And as you can see, this is to the north of the site. I'm standing in what is currently a community orchard that's been recently planted. You can see this on the right-hand side of that photo. The trees along the B656 will largely be retained and the land dips down here. And the next slide, please. Just put this in, this shows the properties in Tower Road. So this shows the nearby development and what it looks like. And could I just go to the next slide, please? I'm just going back to the site layout plan as I just summarise the application. So the proposal as amended seeks for full planning permission for up to 66 dwellings, of which 40% would be affordable. And the council's new local plan, it was adopted, as you know, on the 8th of November this year and is considered up to date for the purposes of national policy. And the NPPF advises that decision makers should approve development proposals that accord with an up-to-date local plan without delay. And it's concluded that the proposed development is broadly in accordance with the development plan and there are not any material considerations that indicate the application shouldn't be approved. All of the application site, excluding the attenuation basin area to the north, falls within the settlement boundary now as defined within the local plan. The proposed attenuation basin would be sited outside of the housing allocation site on land within the ownership of the applicant. It's the officer's view that the proposed attenuation pond constitutes an engineering operation that preserves the openness of the greenbelt and doesn't conflict with the purposes of including land within it. So as such, it's been concluded that the excavation of the basin within the greenbelt doesn't therefore represent inappropriate development. Whilst we acknowledge it's not ideal that the attenuation basin is sited outside the red line of the application site, it is considered that on balance, this is not a sustainable reason to refuse planning permission. It's the officer's view that the housing site constitutes previously developed land, because until recently there were buildings on the site for the garden centre. All of the application site, excluding the attenuation basin area, benefits from an allocation under policy CD2 for an estimated 54 dwellings, and the local plan removed the whole allocation site from the greenbelt and incorporated it within the settlement boundary of Codicot. And this policy also contains detailed policy criteria for consideration in the determination of any relevant applications for planning permission. And it's considered as set out in the report that the proposals broadly comply with the site-specific policy criteria set out in policy CD2. Where the proposals don't completely comply with the policy criteria in CD2, it is considered that on balance, these are not sustainable reasons to withhold planning permission. And the concerns raised by the parish council and local residents with regards to impact on overstretched infrastructure are noted. However, it's not considered that this is a sustainable reason to withhold planning permission. Section 106 contributions have been sought to mitigate some of the impacts, and no objections have been received from statutory consultees on these grounds. And now that the application at Heath Lane has been granted, it's possible for this application to be determined, as the Heath Lane permission, as you are aware, has resulted in an appropriate solution for the expansion of Codicot Primary School to be secured, which would accommodate additional pupils arising from this site. A contribution towards the expansion of Codicot Primary School has been secured by the Section 106 agreement. The concerns raised by the parish council and local residents with regards to increased traffic, highway safety, particularly on the high street, and parking issues are noted. However, in the absence of an objection from the Highways Authority, it's the officer's view that these would not be sustainable reasons to withhold planning permission. And during the course of this application, there have been negotiations in relation to the design and layout of the scheme. The scheme was subject to design review, and Design South East produced a report in December 2020. Prior to and following the publication of this design review report, there have been several rounds of negotiations. There have been numerous amended plans. It's considered that the layout and design of the proposed scheme is now acceptable. As discussed in the report, the plans show, as you can see on, hopefully you can see on this site layout plan, they show 2 new pedestrian accesses to the adjacent parish council owned land to the east of the site. And the Section 106 agreement has secured the enhancement of the existing playground in lieu of provision of a locally equipped area of play on the site. Either this would be by the developer carrying out the enhancement themselves, or if they're unable to obtain the necessary consents, then an equivalent contribution would be passed to the parish council to spend on the playground. At this stage, then, the parish council, as reported in the report, have only agreed to 1 access and have not agreed to the offer to upgrade the playground. Officers of the council officers are of the view that the proposed accesses on the eastern boundary are positive in planning and design terms, as they increase the permeability of the site and allow access to the playground and other community facilities. It's noted that the site-specific criterion policy CD2 in the local plan just requires access and doesn't specify there has to be more than 1. So we've concluded that the proposal would be policy compliant, as at least 1 access would be secured by the Section 106 agreement. Our preference, North Herts Council officers' preference, is that access to the playground would be secured if the parish council will only allow 1 access. And both accesses remain on the plans. So the gate to the southern access on the eastern boundary adjacent to the Scout Hut would have to remain locked unless the parish council were to allow access in the future. We consider this unfortunate, but at least allows the opportunity for increased permeability in the future, should the parish council allow access at a later date. So in terms of this application, at this stage, the planning contribution, planning obligation figures have been agreed by all parties. Discussions are ongoing regarding the wording of the Section 106 agreement, such as trigger points. However, it's considered that the Section 106 agreement is advanced enough to refer this matter to Planning Committee, which is why it's before you now, and the outstanding issues are minor in nature and can be resolved prior to determination. So as such, the recommendation is that planning permission should be granted, subject to conditions and completion of the Section 106 agreement, and the applicant agreeing to extend the statutory period in order to complete the agreement if required. So in conclusion, there are no material considerations to indicate that the application should not be determined in accordance with the development plan, and there are no objections from statutory consultees. It's the officer's view that the proposed development would accord with the development plan, including the adopted local plan, and that there are no sustainable reasons to withhold planning permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Naomi. Do you have any questions for Naomi on her presentation? Councillor Levitt.
Sure, it's not so much on the presentation, but on a report, but I don't think it really forms part of the debate. And it's relating to the Section 106 agreement and highways obligations, a car club bay and a car club provision. Just how enforceable and just how practical is that as a condition?
Naomi?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, we put it actually in the Section 106 agreement rather than as a condition, because I think that makes it more enforceable. It's something that we include relatively routinely, and was included on the Heath Lane Section 106 agreement, which I've modelled this one on to be consistent. So it's something that by effectively how it's tied up is that one of the visitors' parking spaces or an alternative number need to be provided on the land and made available for use in accordance with the travel plan. And my understanding is that they submit details as part of the Section 106 agreement to tie that up. So I think having it as part of the Section 106 agreement, it is probably more enforceable than using a condition.
Thank you. Any other questions for Naomi? Councillor Nigel
Yeah, a factual question. I think you mentioned the pond. Did you say attenuation pond? I wasn't familiar with the term, so I'm showing my ignorance, but I'd like an answer.
No,
yeah.
give an answer.
Yeah, that's fine. And the attenuation pond is to the north of the site. So where you've got the red line of the site, it's included within the red line site, but outside of the allocation site in the local plan. So this is a SUDS feature. So it's an attenuation pond SUDS feature. So it would be a basin in the land that, you know, in case of for excess water, but for most part I think it would be mainly empty. There would be a small corner of it that would be sort of the eastern corner that would always be filled with water, so that would be a pond, but the rest would have very, very little water in it. So it's a sustainable urban drainage feature.
I still didn't get definition of attenuation, but
oh.
Is it?
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether this is feasible, but county, the Development Control Committee, if there's highways work and we're concerned that the applicant might not do it, we take a bond, and so that county can then do that work. And if that work proves to be of a lesser cost, then the difference is handed back to the developer. So is there something like that that we could do on our applications to take a bond?
Tom?
It's not usual practice. It might be a question to, or point of clarification for the speaker in a minute. Essentially, I believe that the sustainable transport contributions have been secured in section 106, and any other highway works will be secured via section 278 with the highway authority. That's usually how it works. We don't tend to use bonds. It's not usual practice.
Thank you. Councillor Tyson?
Yeah, Naomi, in the report, I think there's a reference to something that the inspector might have said about a transport assessment, looking at the cumulative impact of all the 4 Codicot sites, and that hasn't yet been carried out, I think you said. So is that something that we can expect? Because at the moment there's only a site-specific transport management plan, and obviously we might end up with 4 of those all in isolation of each other. At what point will there be an assessment of the cumulative effect?
Yeah, thank you.
No.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yes, I've covered this in paragraph 4.1.87. So the site-specific criteria refers to a transport assessment to consider the cumulative impacts of the 4 sites in Codicot, and then the inspector reiterates that. So I've covered this in 4.1.89. The planning application was submitted with a transport statement in December 2021. They submitted an amended, a revised one, updated one. And this concluded that the proposed development would not have a significant adverse effect on the operation of the highway networks within the vicinity of the site or on road safety, and the development proposals are reasonable and appropriate for the location, and that there are no reasons why development proposals shouldn't be granted planning permission. So the Highways Authority were consulted on the application, and they've not, and as I've said in 4.1.90, it doesn't appear that a transport assessment to consider the cumulative impacts of the 4 sites in Codicot on the village centre and minor roads has been carried out. However, the Highways Officer refers to this local plan site-specific criteria in their comments, and in the absence of an objection from the Highways Authority impact on traffic, it would not be a sustainable reason to withhold planning permission in our view. So that's been covered. That's how we've covered it in the report. And I've also commented on relation to a recent application at Cowards Lane. The Highways Officer stressed that they're no longer a capacity-based highway authority. So our view is that the Highways Authority are aware of the policy requirements, aware of the wording, have assessed the information submitted, but have not raised an objection. And without an objection from the Highways Authority, we wouldn't be recommending refusal on those grounds.
Thank you. Okay. Can I move on?
Yes, I mean, it doesn't actually answer the question that I asked, which was, will there be an assessment that covers the cumulative effect at some point?
Do you want me to answer that now? No, there wouldn't be, because we consider this application as it stands, and transport assessments have been carried out, but as I say, it doesn't appear that cumulative ones have. But the Highways Authority has not raised an objection, so we wouldn't be asking for that information at this stage.
Thank you, Naomi. Can I now move on to registered speakers, please? Member Advocate objecting, Councillor Ralph Munster.
Good evening, and Councillor Moody has asked me to speak on his behalf with respect to this application. Unfortunately, as a result of the industrial action by the Royal College of Nursing, Councillor Moody has been deployed on the NHS frontline, and I know he's incredibly disappointed that he's unable to speak on this important application. I hope I will make a suitable alternative. As you can see, this application is for 66 homes to be built on the former Wyvale Garden Centre in the village of Codicot. The development is proposed by Taylor Wimpey Homes, who are already developing the Heath Lane site within the village. Of all of the sites contained within the recently adopted local plan, the opinion and views of residents in the village is that this application is the most appropriate out of the 4 sites which have been identified within the plan, as it sits on the edge of Codicot. But as you have read in the report, that doesn't mean residents don't have concerns. Ongoing developments continue to result in a number of issues for residents, and therefore it's important that Taylor Wimpey and NHDC work together in order to address these issues, ensuring residents don't suffer as a result of poor planning decisions. One issue which has been highlighted is that the site sits at the end of a national speed limit restriction for traffic coming from Hitchin using the B656. A long-term issue in Codicot is vehicles speeding into the village, and whilst Hertfordshire County Council is trying to address this by implementing a speed reduction scheme which will slow vehicles to 20 miles an hour throughout the high street, there is a concern that no consideration has been given to reducing the speed of traffic prior to the entrance of this proposed site. Another issue regarding road safety is the fact that the site also sits opposite the Whitwell Road junction, an accident hotspot, and the concern is that the entrance to this site will be as hazardous as the entrance was when the site was formerly a garden centre. These issues are compounded when the A1M is closed, as a significantly increased amount of traffic travels directly past the proposed site, as I'm sure would have been shown by any traffic surveys which have been carried out. Therefore, it's vital that alternative and appropriate signage and road markings are implemented in order to address these concerns and ensure this development doesn't have a negative impact on road safety. I'm told that Taylor Wimpey haven't made any friends in Codicot since they started the development on Heath Lane, as a large number of residents who live near the current site have made numerous complaints to Councillor Moody, Codicot Parish Council and this authority about continued breaches on the site. Just some of the issues which have been highlighted as a result.
Can I just stop you there? Can we just stick to this application, not to others?
Of course, it will be addressed in my comments later on. Just some of the issues which have been highlighted as a result are noise, dust, inconsiderate working hours, dangerous roads, inconsiderate parking, amongst a number of others. And I would hope Taylor Wimpey is both hearing the concerns of residents and implementing policies to reduce the negative impact of development and what that's having to residents. It's important that these breaches are dealt with by NHDC in a robust manner, and Councillor Moody strongly feels that it hasn't been as this present moment in time. Within the village of Codicot, there are currently 3 major sites under construction, all within 600 metres of each other, and all of which are operating independently from each other. This development will be the 4th within a 600-metre radius. All of the sites are using the high street to deliver materials, and this brings another number of issues within the village, including congestion on the high street, dirty roads, and inappropriately parked vehicles, to name a few. In short, the roads within the village are not suitable for the gross weights which construction traffic is transporting. There have been many lessons learned since the Heath Lane development commenced, and we must ensure that those lessons are implemented when dealing with this application. We therefore would like the committee to consider imposing some conditions on this application should they grant approval this evening. The first is to have a signed construction management plan in place prior to the commencement of any work on the site. All site personnel must park on the site and not on the high street or surrounding residential streets. There must be no site deliveries made before 9 a.m. and none after 3:30 p.m. This condition would allow parents to get their children to and from school without the concerns of the road being blocked by a delivery. All vehicles leaving the site must be watched prior to leaving, and the event of poor weather, the road is cleared immediately. No weekend working. Currently, there are 3 sites working at the weekend, and residents have felt that there is little to no break from the noise of construction. Ensuring the right amount of allocated parking per house has been allocated on the planning application, and that is proportionate to the size of the house. Unfortunately, on the Heath Lane site, there are 4-bedroom houses with 1 allocated parking space. And Taylor Wimpey to update local residents about different phases that would take place during the build. Hedgerows and trees that form part of the original site are not removed as they have been on the Heath Lane site, and monthly site visits scheduled by officers from this authority. The local plan indicated Codicott is a village. Chair, may I have 10 seconds?
Yes.
Thank you. Designated for a village for growth, and therefore I do hope that should permission be granted for this application, that Taylor Wimpey implements action to address the issues and concerns of residents, as well as learning from the mistakes which have been made at Heath Lane. Thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Thank you, Councillor Munster. Any questions or clarification from Councillor Munster? No. Can we go on to a supporter to Nick Stafford?
Yeah,
For
thank
5
you.
minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. My name is Nick Stafford. I'm Head of Planning at Tetra Tech and the agent in respect to this application. The arrival of this application at Planning Committee marks a significant milestone in this long-term project. The proposal sees the redevelopment of a previously developed brownfield site for 66 new homes, including 26 much needed affordable homes. The original planning application was submitted some 3.5 years ago and has tracked the local plan process. As noted by Naomi just now in her detailed presentation, there's been significant engagement with officers of the council and other stakeholders throughout, including consideration by Design South East Review Panel, the recommendations of which have been fed into the final proposals. The application also followed community consultation, including a public exhibition back in March 2019, a couple of months before submission. This well-attended event gave the applicant and the consultant team the opportunity to present proposals, explain the detail of the scheme, and listen to feedback. The outcomes of this process are recorded within the submitted statements of community involvement. Crucially, the local plan process has now concluded and the former Wyvale site is removed from the Greenbelt and allocated for housing. The hard work and time spent on involving and improving the scheme over time since the submission of the application means that you're presented with a scheme of very high quality design and layout, meeting and exceeding all policy and design requirements. It's important that when land is removed from the Greenbelt, that it is optimised to make the best and most efficient use of the site, whilst ensuring a high quality scheme that will deliver an attractive environment and level of amenity for future residents to enjoy. The scheme before you this evening clearly achieves that, with open space equating to 20% of the total site area and a low residential density at 33 dwellings per hectare. Further, as well as delivering 66 dwellings to the overall housing supply against a backdrop of historic under-provision, it also provides a policy-compliant level of much-needed affordable housing with a mix of 26 affordable housing units designed to meet current needs of North Herts residents as set out at paragraph 4.1.20 of your officer's report. In terms of the specific policy requirements of the local plan site allocation CD2, the scheme as submitted addresses each of the policy criteria, including existing boundary planting only being removed where this is dead, dying, or of low quality, as set out with its supporting arboricultural material. Any being removed is being replaced with an enhanced native planting buffer of between 4 and 7 metres deep, proposed along the northern boundary of the site. Significant financial contributions in excess of £1.9 million towards local and county needs are generated by the scheme to be secured through the Section 106. The terms of the Section 106, as discussed, have been agreed with the council and are outlined in detail at paragraph 4.1.173 of the officer report. This includes an education contribution to help secure the expansion of the village primary school, as well as local community benefits towards Codicott, Scout Hut and Berry Lane Sports Pavilion, amongst others. A detailed transport assessment is provided, which considers all highway-related matters set in the context of the proposed residential development with a negligible difference between daily vehicular movements than the previous garden centre use on the site. And pedestrian access to the adjoining sports field and play area is provided by Taylor Wimpey to the eastern boundary, which has always been a central requirement of the council from pre-application stage and throughout. One additional technical detail to quickly highlight is the location of the Suds Basin. This is on land in the far north of the application site, on land fully in the ownership of Taylor Wimpey. It is to be a dry basin, only holding water in flood events. It also provides a great opportunity to introduce additional native planting in an area which is not accessible to residents, bringing significant biodiversity enhancements, contributing towards a 10% biodiversity net gain on the site. This was to be confirmed through the obligation within 106, but as just updated, it's no longer required after Herts Ecology confirmed the 10% net gain position. Whilst not a policy requirement, Taylor Wimpey will be providing electric car charging for every house. This is to be secured by condition. The new homes will include renewable energy technologies where appropriate, such as PV panels and water heat recovery. And Taylor Wimpey also provides ecological enhancements such as hedgehog highways, bee bricks, insect hotels, and bird and bat boxes within their schemes. These will complement the extensive areas of new wildflower, hedgerow, and tree planting proposed by the application scheme. It is accepted that bringing this application to committee much before this evening's meeting would have had the potential to have been premature whilst the local plan was moving through its final stages before adoption. However, now that the plan is adopted and the site is allocated, there is no reason to delay the issuing of planning permission. The scheme is technically sound, with no outstanding objections from statutory consultees. Policy and design standards are achieved. The Section 106 is agreed and ready to go, with significant contributions being delivered, and the scheme would deliver a high-quality environment for future residents, reinforced by a design review process. It's important to get the housing numbers committed to the council's pipeline, including the much-needed affordable housing. It's our view, therefore, that there is no reason why your office's careful and detailed consideration and recommendation to grant planning permission subject to the completion of the Section 106 legal agreement shouldn't be endorsed by members this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any points of clarification from members? No? Naomi, would you like to respond to any points raised?
Yes, please. Should I respond to the points? There's a couple of points raised with regards to highway safety, first of all. This is covered in my report in 4.1.93, and I note the concerns about speeding traffic. However, the Highways Authority have recommended conditions and haven't recommended objection on highway safety grounds. So without an objection from the Highways Authority, wouldn't be comfortable objecting on these grounds or recommending conditions or additional conditions to what they have already. The other issue that has been raised relates to construction management. This is all covered by a condition in the report. So it's, I'll find the number, I think it's condition 11. I'll just find it. Condition 7, and this is requires a construction management plan. And this condition has been recommended by, it's been recommended by the Highways Authority and Environmental Health, and also there's some ecology in there as well. And the reason for this condition is to cover all the issues that have been raised. So this construction management plan would need to be submitted, and it would cover many of the issues that have been mentioned. I don't think it, when we, as you're aware, when we're deciding whether to put conditions on and the wording of them, we've got to think, do they meet the tests in the NPPF? They've got to be reasonable, they've got to be enforceable. And I don't think it would be reasonable to add extra restrictions. So, for example, it was mentioned no weekend working. Well, as there's an informative on informative 4, environmental and health informative, talks about working hours Monday to Friday 8 till 6, Saturdays 8 till 1, and not on Sundays and bank holidays. That's pretty standard. It would not be reasonable, even given the situation, it wouldn't be reasonable to add extra restrictions on. Things like the wheel washing, that would all be covered by the construction management plan. With regards to the deliveries, I noticed there was mentioned about school drop-off and pick-up times. This is covered in the construction management plan condition. It says timing of they would need details of timing of construction activities as of construction operations, including delivery times and removal of waste, and to avoid school pick-up and drop-off times. So again, that's covered. The other issue was mentioned was monthly site visits. I think we've got to, when we put these conditions on, we've got to make sure that they're achievable and reasonable. So I would suggest that all those issues are all covered by the construction management plan condition, and I don't think we need anything additional. I think it wouldn't be reasonable in this case. Another thing that was mentioned was the trees and shrubs to all be retained. Well, the application was accompanied by landscape strategy, also an arboricultural report and assessment which sets out which trees are to be removed, as I say, along the northern boundary, and the trees and shrubs are to be removed due to their health, and having replacement trees to the certain, to have more longevity. But elsewhere on the site, there are trees to be retained and some to be removed, for example, the Leylandi, which would be a positive. So I think that is already, as I say, already covered by the report submitted, and there's conditions in relation to trees and retention of. So I think both of those issues are covered adequately already. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. Shall we go to debate? Councillor Willoughby.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's fair to say that I think the vast majority of Councillor Muntz's outlining of the issues and the have been dealt with by the conditions. This site is in the local plan, as I understand it, so I would move to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Willoughby. Do we have Councillor David Levitt?
Yes, Chair. I have no problems with the site and what's happening on the sites. It falls within the remit of the local plan. It is an allocated site within there. Where I'm picking up on is on the cumulative impact on the highways. If I refer you to pages, I think it's 80. I can't remember, see what page it is, but it's paragraphs 4.1.88 to 4.1.90, which relate to the cumulative impact. It ends up at 4.190. It does not appear that a transport assessment to consider the cumulative impacts of sites CD1, 2 and 3 and 5 on the village centre and minor roads to and from Codicot, etc., etc. However, the highway officer refers to this local plan, Going backwards on that to 4.189, a transport statement only covered this particular site, and it concluded that significant impact would not have significant adverse impact on operation of the highways network in the vicinity of the site. Now, if you go back to 4.1.88, which is the inspector's report, he considers the cumulative impact and talks about it at length, and he did so during the hearings as well. At the end of that paragraph, he says, however, I agree with the council that the planning applications for each of the allocations should include transport assessments to consider the combined local impacts in greater depth, and that any mitigation identified as a result should be secured under the main modifications which in numbers and relate to those specific sites. And add these requirements to the policies. MM23 adds further explanations and details. And it concludes with all are needed for effectiveness. Now, this application hasn't considered all of those sites, and it hasn't considered all of the transport implications and the capacity implications. So whilst I agree that the site is there in the local plan, I think I would like to see an amendment that puts in that transport assessment on the cumulative impact does actually take place before it proceeds, because the inspector recommends that. He says that's required. It's part of the local plan, and I think that should have been done.
Would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I hear and understand what Councillor Levitt's saying. Yes, it does require that under policy CD2, as it does the other sites in Codicot. All 4 sites is the same requirement. For what it's worth, as you're all aware, two of the 4 sites have already been approved, and they did provide cumulative impacts. So in a sense, that's already taken place twice, albeit under those separate applications. So, and they were found to be acceptable. If Council Levitt's minded that this does need to take place, we could require it via a condition that an updated transport assessment is submitted, and that includes cumulative impact, and that would probably have to be a prior to commencement condition. I don't know, sorry. If Naomi wants to expand at all.
Naomi?
Yes, I think that's an option that we could recommend a condition prior to commencement. There's an updated transport condition taking into account the cumulative effects is submitted. The reason it wasn't asked for as part of the application was because we had no objections from the Highways Authority, and they were aware of the site-specific criteria.
Thank you, Naomi. So, does your proposal still stand, Councillor Libby? With the additional condition?
I'm happy to amend it to include that condition, yes.
Thank you. And Councillor Levitt, are you going to second?
On those grounds, Chair, that with that taken into account, it is a requirement within the local plan. I think it should be done before commencement. So yes, I'm happy to second on those grounds with that amendment.
Thank you. Any other comments? Shall we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion's carried as amended.
Thank you very much. That closes the meeting. The next PCC meeting is on the 12th. Oh, no, it's not. It's not on the 12th of January. That's about to be cancelled, is it? We haven't cancelled. Sorry, you didn't hear that. All those on TV. That will be confirmed one way or the other. Can you please be careful on the stairs going down, because they're very slippy. You may want to use the lift, like I will be doing. And have a good Christmas. Thank you.